time for an introduction. Let's go ahead and get into it. Today we're going to be talking about Christa Pike. Now in 1994, you had an idiot, her name was Christa, who met a dummy. His name was Tadero. And both coming from somewhat difficult backgrounds, they found solace within each other. Now in 1994, Tadero asked Christa, "Do you want to be my girlfriend?" To which case she most likely responded,
"Oh, you bet your black ass I did."
So the two began dating. Now also while they were together, they started to get into the occult, satanic, voodoo, devil worship type stuff. Now, Tadero had a thing for white women, so things became a little messy when a second one entered. Her name was Colleen. Now, Colleen was 19 when she came to the scene, and Christa, she got mean when it came to her peen. Now, Colleen was telling her, "I don't want your Negro." Christa did not believe her, and so she wanted to get rid of the problem. So Christa came back to Colleen and offered to make peace by smoking the devil's lettuce. So Colleen agreed. She thought it was a great idea. Maybe they would smooth everything over between all of them. So on January the 12th, 1995, Christa, Tadero, Colleen, and a fourth friend named Shadala, they all signed out of their school and they went out to the middle of the woods. Now, when they got to the middle of the woods, Shadala, that fourth random person, she became lookout. She was doing like this, making sure nobody was coming, while Christa and Tadero, they attacked. Yeah, and they pretty much tortured Colleen for quite a bit. Now, after they beat her, they got a knife, they slashed all over her, they taunted her, they carved a pentagram in the girl's chest. Now, Christa was like, "You know what? I'm getting bored with this. Let's just go ahead and kill her." So they got a big rock and they threw it on top of Colleen's head. And yeah. Now, after Colleen was gone, Christa got a piece of her skull, put it in her pocket, and took it home. She washed it off and then took it to school. Then she showed it to all her friends. "Look at the skull that I have. I'm so cool." Christa was sentenced to death by electrocution. Tadero was sent to life in prison with a possibility of parole after 25 years. And then a random one, Shadala, she only got probation. Now, she was sentenced to death, but then she did an appeal for it, and then she canceled the appeal because she was like, "You know what? Let me just go to hell." Then she got scared, so she canceled that and she reappealed. She lost, and she's still on death row, though. While she's in jail, in 2001, her and an inmate named Natasha tried to kill a girl named Patricia, and they almost did it. She was given an attempted murder charge for that. In 2012, she promised coochie to a pen pal, and she almost broke out of prison. She's still in the Tennessee Department of Corrections on death row. Crazy, right?
This is Christa Pike. In 1996, she became the youngest woman to be sentenced to death in the United States of America. A year before, her and two accomplices killed Colleen Slemmer. Christa, who was at uni with Colleen, became convinced that the girl was trying to steal her boyfriend. So one day, Christa, her boyfriend, and this idiot, they hatched a plan. They lured Colleen out of uni with the promise of a good time and an apology in the woods. But when she got there, Colleen was attacked by Christa and her boyfriend, Tadero. Shadala, she stood watch. In an attack that lasted half an hour, they beat her, they slashed her, and they carved a pentagram into her chest. Almost forgot to mention that our good friend Christa Pike was into worshipping the occult. Colleen died when Christa hit her over the head with a large piece of asphalt. She then kept a piece of her skull and told everyone she knew exactly what had happened to Colleen. It didn't take a million years for the three to be arrested, and Shadala became a star witness for the prosecution. Tadero got 25 years with the possibility of parole. And Christa became the youngest woman to ever be sentenced to death in the US. A few of you wanted an update on Christa Pike, who was the youngest person to ever be sentenced to death in the United States of America. Well, after her conviction, she didn't just sit back quietly. Launched, cancelled, and relaunched a few appeals that were all rejected. The appeals were expected. She was convicted of attempted murder while in prison. It was in 2001, she almost strangled someone to death with the help of somebody else, but they were caught in time and the woman was fine. Then, in 2012, she tried to escape from prison. Some people see a death sentence as, "That's it, my life is over." Christa, she was like, "Nah, I'm gonna live this life." With the help of a corrections officer, she tried to duplicate a key and just get on out of there. The officer lost their job and found himself in prison, because if there's one thing about Christa, she's gonna have some co-defendants. So Christa Pike, who was 18 at the time of her sentencing, is now 44 and still sitting in Tennessee on death row, awaiting execution for the crimes that she committed in 1995.
What did this monster do to become the youngest woman to be put on death row? Welcome to Relomax Crime, and today we're gonna talk about Christa Gale Pike, the youngest woman to be put on death row. In early 1995, Pike and her boyfriend befriended Colleen Slimmer through a vocational program. However, their intentions were far from innocent. Manipulating Colleen's trust, Pike lured her to a secluded area. What followed was a nightmarish display of violence as Pike brutally attacked Colleen. Colleen had been brutally murdered by having her head smashed in with a concrete block after suffering of almost an hour of torture, which included having a pentagram carved into her chest while she was still alive. Christa murdered Colleen because she became jealous that Colleen was trying to steal her boyfriend even though it wasn't true. Pike began to show off the piece of skull around the school, and within 36 hours, Christa was arrested. On March 30th, 1996, Pike was sentenced to death by electrocution for the murder charge and 25 years in prison for the conspiracy charge.
In 1995, a young woman committed one of the most brutal murders in American history. Her name was Christa Pike. She was only 18 years old when she savagely killed fellow classmate Colleen Slimmer. In our latest episode of Once Upon a Crime, we share the events that unfolded the night of January 12, 1995, and explore the twisted mind of killer Christa Pike. Hear all the details on episode 281, Dead Woman Walking, Christa Pike. Available wherever you listen to podcasts.
It is therefore ordered that you shall be put to death.
The tears flowed when Pike was sentenced to die. 19-year-old Colleen Slimmer moved from Florida to Knoxville to take computer classes with the federal Job Corps program. And on the night of January 12, 1995, Slimmer went out with a few classmates.
She didn't have a clue the danger she was in.
The morning of Friday the 13th, police recovered Slimmer's tortured body behind the abandoned steam plant at the University of Tennessee. Within one day, they arrested Job Corps students Shadola Peterson, Daryl Shipp, and Christa Pike.
She was the ringleader out of the bunch.
I knew exactly what I was doing. Everything that I did that night, I knew what I was doing.
She had a piece of the skull wrapped up in a napkin in her coat pocket. That's a trophy to show that that piece she had fit exactly as a piece of puzzle in the skull.
Peterson was let off with probation because she testified against Shipp and Pike. Both were convicted of murder, and Shipp got life in prison. As for Pike's punishment, Colleen Slimmer's mother, May Martinez, wanted the jury to set a date with death.
I would like to see her and not go on living with taxpayers' money paying for her to live in jail to get an education.
Christa Pike was the youngest woman to receive the death penalty at age 18 in 1995. Now, nearly 30 years later, she is pleading for her life to be spared. On January 13, 1995, Pike, along with two others, lured 19-year-old Colleen Slimmer to a secluded area of the University of Tennessee's Knoxville campus. Slimmer was beaten and tortured. They cut her with a box cutter and carved a pentagram into her chest. Pike struck Slimmer in the head with a piece of asphalt and kept a piece of her skull as a souvenir. Pike was sentenced to death and became the youngest woman on death row. Lawyers for Pike filed a motion on Wednesday asking the court to reconsider her death sentence, citing a 2022 state Supreme Court decision that said mandatory life sentences for juveniles and homicide cases are unconstitutional. Slimmer's mother is fighting to make sure that that doesn't happen.
Now I'm fighting for justice. I want her either executed where she never can hurt another person or be alive and get things that she's not supposed to get. And she went through hell, you know? She was tortured for 45 minutes, back and forth, racing, getting up, trying to fight. She kept telling her, let me go back to Florida. I will not tell anybody. They knock her down and cut her again. It ain't over with until Christa's not alive yet.
In 1995, Christa Pike, a student at the University of Tennessee, became embroiled in a chilling crime that would forever alter her life and the lives of those around her. Drawn into a world of teenage rebellion and turbulence, Pike and her accomplices targeted a fellow student, leading them to a secluded forested area where their sinister plan would unfold. As tensions simmered, Christa Pike's chilling intentions were revealed through a series of incriminating notes that would play a crucial role in the court proceedings that followed. What began as a night of camaraderie under the stars quickly spiraled into horror as Pike's thrill-seeking led to a brutal act that would shock the community. In the aftermath of the crime, the serene woods turned into a site of fear and disbelief as investigators pieced together the events that led to the grave outcome. As news of the murder spread, Christa Pike became a figure of notoriety, her trial drawing national attention to the complexities of youth, violence, and accountability.
The youngest woman ever to be sentenced to death in the United States. She was only 18 years old when she committed the crime and 20 years old when she was sentenced. This is the story of Christa Pike. Reminder, I tell a lot of dark true crime stories on this channel. Severe discretion is advised, but follow along if you want to hear more. So this is Christa Pike, and she had a terrible childhood. She was born in West Virginia in 1976. Her parents divorced when she was really young, and her childhood was marred by dysfunction and neglect. Her mother's name was Carissa Hansen, and she sucked ass. She often prioritized romantic relationships over parenting, and it left Christa feeling abandoned and unloved. Both of her parents were incredibly negligent. One of her aunts even noted that they found her as a baby crawling through dog droppings all over the house. She bounced around a lot in different foster homes because she was apparently violent towards other children, so she couldn't find a permanent house. And by the time she reached the teenage years, she had made several attempts on her life, and she turned to substances in order to cope. She dropped out of high school her junior year, and with little support and direction, she joined the job court in Nashville, Tennessee as a fresh start. But tale as old as time, she instead became infatuated with a boy. And this is where the story takes an even darker turn. So Christa Pike became absolutely smitten with Daryl Shipp, who was 17 at the time, and he had his own troubled past. But together, they bonded over a shared interest in the occult and dark practices. So it's important to recognize that Christa's history with abandonment, lack of guidance, and exposure to toxic relationships as a kid played a big role in shaping her psyche, and she really felt like this boy made her complete. But then another girl comes into the picture and threatens everything. This is 19-year-old Colleen Slemmer. She was in the same job training program as Christa and Tada Rail, and Christa had totally convinced herself that Colleen was trying to steal her boyfriend. Whether there is any truth to this still remains unclear. But what we do know is that Christa's jealousy spiraled into a violent obsession, and she started like a really insidious plot. On the night of January 12, 1995, Christa lured Colleen into a wooded area near the Job Corps campus. She brought along her boyfriend Daryl Shipp and an accomplice, Shadola Peterson. They told Colleen that they were just going to go into the woods and party. But then, Christa and her boyfriend attacked her. Colleen was beaten, taunted, slashed, and tortured for 30 minutes. They both carved pentagrams into her chest, and then the final blow came when Christa took a piece of asphalt and smashed it into Colleen's skull, which ended her life. But the cruelty didn't stop there. Christa decided she wanted a souvenir from the high crime, so she decided to take a piece of Colleen's skull. They were caught within 36 hours, for a number of reasons. For one, the brutality of the crime left a mountain of evidence that pointed them straight to these three. And Colleen, with her 18-year-old hubris, decided to go around and brag about the crime to her friends, and even showing off Colleen's skull to people, so the evidence was overwhelming, and there was no question that they did it. It was just what was going to happen to them now. Christa was tried in 1996, and she didn't show much remorse. The jury only took 2.5 hours to find her guilty of first-degree murder. Christa's defense argued that she was only 18 at the time of the crime, and that her troubled upbringing should influence her sentencing, but they decided to sentence Christa Pike to death. Daryl Shipp, her boyfriend, was 17 at the time of the crime, and he was sentenced to life in prison with no parole. And their accomplice, Shadola Peterson, was given probation in exchange for her testimony. Christa Pike remains on death row to this day, despite her many attempts to apply for appeals, which have all been denied. And in that time, she has not been a model prisoner. She has been violent with other inmates, and she even plotted a prison escape with her boyfriend and a prison guard, unsuccessfully. So while Christa's upbringing offers us a glimpse into her mindset as a person looking for belonging in all the wrong places, doesn't excuse her behavior or the decisions that she made that night, because Colleen Slummer's family still lives with the pain of her loss. And that is the story of Christa Pike, the youngest woman to ever be sentenced to death.